Guys, just putting away some stuff, but what we're going to talk about in a minute is I did the video about the tools you need, or that I recommend, the tools for maintaining a knife. We talked about ceramic rod. There's been some questions about where to get a good ceramic rod. I will tell you that I got this one at Edge Pro. There's a lot of other. Smoky Mountain Knife Works has always got the larger steel style. And when I talk about steel, I'm talking about like this. Made with ceramic. So there's, to answer a couple questions, there's that. So I'm putting all this stuff away. We're gonna get set up and I'm gonna show you like some of the technique for maintaining the knives with these items. So let me get this put away. Turn out a volume, because here comes music. So guys, you can tell the angle's a little bit different. I'm in a little bit closer. I actually folded my tripod up and put it on the kitchen counter. So what we're gonna talk about is the proper way to use these items, but before I do that, and this item as well, I talked about different strops and having different, I said a paddle strop, maybe having one side be, not necessarily needing, not being loaded. So having one side that is like suede, one side that is polished or more finished than the other on a paddle strop comes in really handy. This is a strop that was made for me by a follower, Marla White. I did a whole video about this, and you can actually, I think she makes these still if you want to buy them. This is by far one of the best paddle strops I've ever had, because you can get into recurves. It's almost like it was purpose made for my business. But there are other types. So you might want to look at getting just a leather strop like this. I actually have used this in the kitchen a few times. Stuff's gotten spilled on it. But it's nice because if you have someplace you can hook it, you can just let it hang like in an area on the counter or something, and then you just lift it up and then you can strop and you can use both sides of it. Coarse side for the initial set, and then the more polished side for, a smoother setting the edge. I mean, there's so many different options. This is my razor strop. It's an expensive strop. It has a felt side and then a kangaroo leather side, which this thing works amazing, but it was very expensive. So what I'm saying is, if you don't necessarily like having something that's taking up counter space, you could always hang one of these from a hook, something like this that you could hang from a hook, and then just lift it up from the counter from that hook and use it like you wanted. Okay, so now we talked about that. So hang on just a second. What I wanted to talk about truly though was there is some technique involved in using any of the items I talked about: the steel, the ceramic rod, or the strop. And so what I'm gonna do is we're gonna look at how you use them and just a little maybe a little tutorial on how to use them. Because just showing you the tool does not provide you with, you can really fuck up a knife doing this. So if you get the angle, if you get it too steep and then you cut into it and then you've wrecked your edge, and then you do have to go back and sharpen. So give me a second. We're going to actually look at the technique. I had to turn the camera around so I can show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let me move this just a little bit. Okay, so we've all seen the videos of the butcher in movies, or on TV shows doing that action. Basically they've got the muscle memory down. I do too. Grew up on a farm. We did butchering. I used the steel. So it's a matter of running that edge down the steel at an angle where you're getting the leading edge. And you can see what I've done there. I've created a micro bevel-ish, but that's a really coarse, really coarse edge. Let me see if I can get in on it here and show you exactly what I'm talking about. You can see how coarse that edge is now because I did it on the steel. What I formed is just a wire burr edge. It will cut. It is sharper now than it was, guaranteed, because this knife was kind of dull. And it's got some chips. But that's basically your technique. So what you're trying to do is you're going to bring your edge up. You're going to bring it up till it just, the leading part of the edge touches. And you're just going to stroke it down that, bring it down that steel. And so that these teeth are making contact with that forward edge. And like I said, that leaves you with a really, really coarse edge. Can you see what I'm talking about there? How it's much coarser. You can see light glinting off the edge itself. You can see how much coarser that edge is. In the scope of things, is that horrible? Well, not really. Because, you know, a lot of times you're just trying to do a quick touch-up. But, let me move you back because we're doing this a little different this time. What you wind up with is a much more refined edge than you had before. Let's say you've been cutting a lot. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring these rolled areas back into alignment and straighten that edge. So with something like that, you're doing a very crude edge adjustment. So now we'll look at the ceramic rod, and the technique for it is the same. It's a matter of, it's just like stropping. You bring it up, I'll show you like this. We'll bring this up. And like I said, you've all seen the videos of the guy going super quick with a strop and doing this number here where he's just going to town on it like that. Well, you know, if you've got that muscle memory down, yes, you can do that. And because all you're doing is just touching that edge to the very front edge of it to the ceramic rod. And the reason I say is you're going to touch just the very edge. It's not a sharpening stone. You're not going to touch that entire bevel. You're just hitting the very edge of it. Because you have a very small area of contact, if you can see it. On a round rod, you have a very small area of contact on that, which means that it's good for doing that very front part of the edge. And so you can do it like this, like you'd be sharpening. Just make sure you're very cautious where you're putting your fingers and things like that. Stropping is a lot like this as well. So you're just gonna kind of go back and forth. If you don't feel comfortable, always cut away from yourself. That angle is a little bit less easy to reproduce. This, what I'm doing right now, is more like sharpening. You have you have a away edge and you have one back to you. This is usually a technique I do, but I know where to stop because I've done this a lot. I have sharpened a lot. I'm not really worried that I'm going to come down and cut my thumb. If you are worried about that, you can always set this on the counter, like a ceramic rod. There's another option for kitchen touch-ups is the ceramic rods, which is too. I forgot to mention it because I don't have one. They do have the ceramic rods that you can buy that are like this. It's a V. They're great for touch-up, not real great for actual sharpening. They are more of a kitchen touch-up thing. But like I said, so it's a matter of putting it on the blade, lifting that bevel up until you feel that it's touching the very front. You don't want to go too steep or you're going to cut into it. And you're going to feel if you've got it too steep. So you just kind of find your angle that you sharpened at, lift it up just a little bit because that's a good bit steeper than I sharpened this knife. And you're just touching the very front of that edge and you're just taking off any rolls or things like that. Now this edge was bad. This knife needed sharpened. So let's turn around and we'll look at how much different the edge looks now that we did it on the ceramic. I may do this on the microscope, but that's your basic technique. It's a lot like sharpening, more like stropping, but you're just basically just touching up that edge. This is way sharper now than it was when it came off the actual steel. That edge is not as coarse, but it is still big. You can definitely see where I stropped. You can see that forward thing, and this knife has got multiple facets. My wife actually used, I hate to admit it, but I don't know if you guys can see that. My wife used to pull through on this. And I have since admonished her against doing so, but it screwed up the edge in a couple places. You can definitely tell, ooh, that is sharp. You can definitely tell a pull through was used. See how those lines. But at any rate, this is my wife's knife. She likes to use it, and I'm not really going to complain too much about how she maintains it. But you can definitely see that I've set up basically a micro bevel on this by using that ceramic. Next time I sharpen, that'll come out. I'll sharpen it all the way down. But you get a much finer edge with something like this. Now, like I said, let's make sure I got away, to push away, draw back. If you've got something like this that has a handle, it's much better for people that are going to be doing it. There are some people that just do the draw on both sides. I don't want to strop this too much because, you know, you can, or not strop this. I don't want to run this on the stone or on that rod too much. But like I said, you can see that there's definitely a chip right there. That will not remove that. That is something that's going to have to go on the stone to take that chip out. But that chip is, it's fairly small. But it's just going to get worse. So that needs sharpened. That's at a point where it needs sharpened. It has an issue that you can't take care of with a strop or a stone, or I mean a Next, we're going to talk about using the strop. The nice thing about a strop is you don't have to, the nice thing about a strop and the drawback to a strop. Let's talk about that. The nice thing about a strop is my technique does not have to be as refined. This material is soft. It is naturally going to, as the blade comes down, it's naturally going to round out and touch the area I want. So I don't have to, it's a little bit different than using a steel. So I'm going to find my angle. I'm going to lift it up ever so slightly. And I'm just going to pull it. I like to go straight like this down to the tip so that I'm actually stropping this way. That way I'm not having to do like this way. And some people think that I'm doing it this way in a curve opposite of the way I sharpen. I'm not. If you watch the way I strop, it stays straight and I'm basically stropping as much like this as possible. Now this is a loaded strop, so I will turn this around and I will show you exactly what I'm doing on the flip side camera because you get a better view of it. But it is different than sharpening. Your angles don't have to be as precise. So hang on a second, let me turn this around and we'll look at the actual stropping. So, like I said, this is that strop. Now this is a loaded strop. You don't necessarily have to have it loaded. This is loaded with chromium oxide. So when you're doing this, what you're gonna do is you're gonna set your knife down. This is awkward, guys. Because I don't think about this. This is why it makes it hard. So, and then I lift it up and then I find an angle where I am making contact with that forward edge. Now this is the least aggressive of any of these methods. And so I am like, it is kind of an angle like that, but I'm trying to maintain that as straight as possible. Here, it's your best, it's the easiest technique for stropping, and it does a really good job. That has refined that edge even a little bit better. And if you look, this is a really flexible knife, guys. Really flexible. Not quite a fillet knife, but pretty close. I'm not putting pressure at all. If you see, there's no real flex in that blade. Maybe a little bit right at the very tip. I'm not pushing. I'm strictly pulling it down, letting the weight of the knife do the work. There is some abrasive on that strop. You can see there's an abrasive compound on there. But now what we've got is a much, much more refined edge than we had even before with the ceramic rod. There's still some chips. There's still some nicks. This will not take any of that out. This will not really lay up a rolled edge readily if it's badly rolled. So I guess the stropping is like sharpening. You've got some angles you have to maintain, but a strop is way more forgiving. A paddle strop is less forgiving than a hanging leather strop. A hanging leather strop is going to have a lot more flex, and it's actually really good for what I'm talking about because it touches the edge up. So I apologize for background noise. My wife and kid just got back. But this technique is pretty simple. It's a lot easier than sharpening. So you lay it down. You can see I'm not touching my edge. I lift it up until I can see underneath that I'm making contact all the way across. I lift it up a little bit more if you're just getting used to it to find where my actual edge is. And then I just bring it back a little bit and then I just pull. Pull. No pressure, nothing. Now you're gonna know if you went too high because you're gonna start seeing, I did that, I will raise it up and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So you're getting ready to, if you go too high, you're gonna see marks on your strop that look like that. And that means you're standing that up too high when you first set it down. So you wanna set it down. You really shouldn't see any lines. So, a lot of it is 100% practice, guys. 100% practice. It's no different than any of the other acts of sharpening. It's just, these are ways to maintain your edge between sharpenings. Now, I will tell you, if you're relying on just a strop, you're gonna have to sharpen way more often than if you were using a ceramic rod and a strop. So, it's a matter of maintaining your stuff. This knife has a lot of chips in it, and that's because as much as I sharpen knives professionally, I don't sharpen our kitchen knives as often as they should. Sharpen, as I said in the last video, sharpen a little, sharpen often. It's gonna save you doing a lot of chip removal and reprofiling stuff on stones, and it's gonna allow you to maintain that edge and you don't have to do as much work. Because I'm not gonna lie to you, if you get a knife that's in bad shape, it's gonna take me a little bit to work on this knife. So to work on this knife and get the chips out of it is going to take me way longer than if I had just been maintaining this edge there. This knife is kind of screwed up. I have two knives in there that I really need to resharpen. So that whole, like I said, sharpen a little, sharpen often, especially spend a lot of time in the kitchen, is a very good idea. By using these items, you are sharpening a little. You're doing more honing. She's stealing the last of the coffee. So you're doing some of the steps of honing as maintaining. A strop is great for maintaining an edge, as long as you haven't let the edge go too far. But there is also something that happens, especially with things like this. And I'm gonna warn you, it's called overstropping. Overstropping can be as bad for an edge as using it and not maintaining it. You can go the other way. Sorry about the pause. I wanted to think about how I wanted to explain this. Overstropping. Overstropping is basically causing you to lose the bite of your edge, because what you've done is, instead of continuing to maintain your micro serrations, what you've done is you've burnished them off. And I've said this a bunch of times, instead of being nice crisp ones like this, they wind up getting all rounded like this, and then it looks good, it might feel sharp to the touch, but it just doesn't have the bite. Those micro serrations are like little saw teeth. And so as you strop, especially with something like chromium oxide, which is softer than the steel, it starts to break down. And instead of having all these crisp angles like this, where the crystals in that chromium oxide are sharp and cutting, they start to round over and turn more into spheres as opposed to little triangles or squares or whatever you're picturing as doing the, I don't know what the crystals in chromium oxide look like. And so you can mitigate that a little bit by using something that does not degrade, which is, I use a lot of the diamond emulsion. Only problem is it doesn't work real well on leather. It doesn't want to soak into finished leather. So that's why I'm saying I would recommend a combination of this and this. That's gonna maintain your edge much longer. You can take this ceramic rod, and since it is an abrasive, it is actually cutting material off slightly. You can see there's metal residue on this. So what you're doing is you basically are resetting your micro serrations down the blade a little, not enough to take out big chips and things. You're not doing material removal, but you're honing that back up as opposed to just doing the steel where you're just cutting grooves. You are actually honing that back up. And then by going back on this in between, you're maintaining your edge, I think, even better than if you were just using the one. The strop will only get you so far. Even though this is my preferred method of touching up an edge, I do understand it has some serious limitations. So those are just the techniques. Like I said, it's a lot like sharpening. It's finding an angle. It takes a lot of practice. It takes practice. Stropping is way easier than using the steel, the rod. But like I said, in the big scope of things, practice makes perfect. Get a couple cheap kitchen knives and practice. and get your technique down. I know without looking what angle I'm setting that at, regardless of which way I'm doing it. You're gonna find that you get better at it with time. And in the scope of things, even if you screw an edge up a little bit, you can fucking resharpen it. If you're able to resharpen your stuff on your own, even if you screw it up a little bit, it's still better for the knife to try and maintain that than have to go to the stones and take off a ton of material every time. A lot of times you can catch an issue before it becomes a big issue. And so as you notice that your knife just isn't cutting the way you want, hit it up on a loaded strop or just a regular leather strop. If that doesn't get it done, you hit it on your ceramic and then go back and hit it on your strop real quick. It's just a combination of the two. It is a much better idea to maintain your knives well for safety. Okay, so I was doing the edit and I realized I didn't explain what I was talking about safety. A kitchen knife that is getting dull, you're gonna, just without realizing it, you're gonna start applying more pressure, and there's much more of a chance that you're going to cut yourself with a dull knife than you will with a sharp knife, because as you get used to using a dull knife, you're going to start pushing harder without realizing it. And the possibility of, oh, sorry, it's shaky, I'm not attached to anything. There's a likelihood of popping between or popping through the material and cutting yourself because you're applying way more pressure than you normally would if the knife was sharp. A sharp knife is always going to be a safer option than a dull knife, because I've heard people say, well, I'd rather have my knives a little dull, that way it doesn't cut me. I've got news for you. I would much rather be cut with a sharp knife than a dull knife. One, you're more likely to cut yourself with a dull knife. Two, a dull knife does not cut, it tears. A cut from a sharp knife will heal quicker and be much less painful. So there's that. That's the explaining the safety piece. I apologize. I'll throw that in. Sorry for stepping in. It happens sometimes. Mainly for safety than it is to just let it run on and get duller and duller and duller. And for God's sake, why people spend a lot of money on kitchen knives and then just throw them away when all they really need is to just be sent to someone to just have the edge conditioned and sharpened. So guys, probably a little bit longer video. I haven't done the edit yet. I do know that I talked about this stuff, the technique that you can use. There is a fourth option, is to keep something like a really fine Arkansas stone somewhere in your kitchen, and you just touch it up real quick on that. That's if you're good at sharpening. That would be what I would recommend, is because that's actually easier, because that is mildly abrasive. So big scope of things, guys. If you just follow some of these techniques and get some practice, you should be able to maintain your kitchen knives for a relatively long time. If you don't cook a lot, you should be able to maintain your edges for a really long time just doing the things that I set out here. So if you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to ask in the comment section. Just know that I had like 700 and something videos up. It might take a few days for me to actually get to answering a comment. And if it's a comment that I feel has already been answered in the video, there's a good chance that I'm just gonna let the other subscribers point out to you that this is where I said it. Because answering comments can take a while. I mean, it takes up a lot of time, and it's distracting from doing other things about business. So guys, if you like the videos, give them a thumbs up. If you don't like them, give them a thumbs down, but please try to tell me why. In this corner here, you're gonna see a link to a video that YouTube thinks you like. Down here will be a video I think you like. Up here is going to be a video, or not a video, a subscription link, and down here will be a Patreon link if you choose to try and support the channel. If you want to support my daughter's ice skating, down below in the description section area will be a link to her GoFundMe. And if you need any sharpening, if you have kitchen knives that are beyond what you think you can do, feel free to get in touch with me. I mean, that's kind of what I do for a living. So guys, love y'all, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next video.